Women's National Month, National Women's Month, I thought it would be befitting to share with you some words of a scholar that I love and respect. Let me share with you these words that she shares in her book. Dr. Wilma C. Gaffney, author of Womanist Midrash, a reintroduction to the women of the Torah and the throne, informs us that the sanctified imagination is the fertile creative space where the preacher-interpreter enters the text, particularly the spaces in the text, and fill them out with missing details, names, backstories, detailed descriptions of the scene and the characters, and so on. The exercise of the sanctified imagination is also a form of what biblical scholars call reader response criticism. Please note that reader response criticism recognizes the meaning of a text is not solely located in the text, but that the reader brings an authoritative interpretive framework to the text with her or him. So allow me to use my sanctified imagination this morning. The burden of ministry tires Jesus out, and he grabs a nap. Jesus is always in touch with his humanity, but he's always never absent from his divinity. The physical challenges that we experience, Jesus himself stays in touch with our humanity as well. Even the Savior of the world in his humanity takes out time to rest, recuperate, and rejuvenate his own body. The weight of seeing people live with the oppression of Roman imperial government, being overtaxed with paying more for protection of the empire, while people are barely making through from day to day, will wear you out. When the government has more input into the lives of its citizens, we border on the fringes of racial discrimination, ecological injustices, sexist domination, gender exploitation, political pollution, rigorous religious bigotry, and social oppression. When you consider those things, they will make you weary. When the sinister work of political elites causes the fight against a global pandemic to be hindered by egomaniacal leadership, and no one wants to take cooperative responsibility for what has happened, you can become worn out. Jesus gets on the boat, finds a nifty place in the bow of the ship, and he decides to take a nap. The bow is that front extended part of the ship that is exposed to the elements first. The bow is that forward part of the ship that comes in contact with the rough waters first. The bow is the lowest part of impact that slices the waves to make progress in the water. The bow is that place that is upwardly focused but nestled in the bottom and allows one to see what's coming ahead immediately. Ironically, isn't it strange that Jesus would find the forward part, the point of impact from the waves, and the place to see further down below to take a nap? The inclusivity of Jesus is often overlooked. Jesus comes aboard our lives to ride with us, and he does not abandon us. Jesus shows us that he is not some absent leader that is uncomfortable with where his sights has been set to keep us going to the other side. Jesus reminds us by his actions that life is to be lived with a sense of godly awareness. Often we forget that our journey has the presence of divinity. In other words, my brothers and sisters, we are not alone. Come here, Jonah. Talk to us, Jonah. Help us this morning, my brother. Jonah says, I was the cause of the boat being in trouble. God gave me an assignment that I was trying to avoid. I wanted to go about doing God's work my way, but then if it wasn't for grace, I would not be able to testify this morning. So they tossed me off the boat to save others while I was on an assignment to go save Nineveh. Come here, Paul. You were assigned to go to Caesar, but the storm redirected you differently. Brother Paul had to save 276 lives that were being taken him to the emperor. The storm broke out, broke the boat into pieces, but no one life fell apart. The storm let them survive the brokenness of what was carrying them and the message on Paul's life. However, my brothers and sisters, there is tension in this text. This morning text has some tension in it, and look at it. Jesus puts the brakes on his body, but the faith of the disciples break and fall to pieces. Jesus put the B-R-A-K-E-S on his body, and then the disciples, B-R-E-K, break their faith because their faith is disturbed by the storm. While Jesus takes a nap, the faith of the disciples snap. Have you ever been driving somewhere and passengers who were with you panicked because they didn't understand the route that you were taking? Have you ever experienced life that it caused you to panic, my brothers and sisters? Because where God has told you you were going, the path didn't look like where God said that you were going to arrive to. We forget that Jesus is on board of our lives. So no matter what happens or is happening, always check the cargo before you panic. When life tosses our ships like an unmanned surfboard and the waves are filling up our boats, always, my brothers and sisters, check your cargo. When it appears that things are going to be drowned in the myriads of difficult days ahead, always check your cargo. When it seems as though that life has given you too much to deal with, please check the cargo in your heart, in your mind, and in your spirit. My brothers and sisters, what is the valuable lesson in this text today? What can we learn from this text that will empower our walk, expand our work, and extend our witness when we check our cargo? I just have a few things to drop on you, and I promise you, I'm going to get out of your way. When you check your cargo, always, hear me, actively examine and inspect who's on board. I wish I had somebody here. When you examine actively who's on board and you recognize Jesus on board, can I please have you check his credentials? Jesus is on board of our lives because he is before the beginning began. He was from eternity before time to ever be recorded. He is the creator of all creation and the sustainer of all life. He is Alpha and Omega and everything in between. Isaiah says he is wonderful, counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. He is the one that's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we can ask, think, according to the power that worketh in us. My brothers and sisters, when you're going through something, please check to see who's on board. I don't know about you, but sometimes some of the people who are on board our ships are people who are trying to keep us from going to the other side. There's always those who are what I call wasted cargo. They hold up progress because they don't want you to be positive and progressive. But Jesus helps us to understand that when life is tossing you and you don't have any control on it, always check the resume of those who are on board. And can't nobody be a better passenger on your ship and on my ship than Jesus Christ himself. I don't know about you, but it just blows my mind that that now that we're reading the story after the fact, that I had to check my own life when God said, you're going to this place. And I said, Lord, it don't look like I'm ever going to make it. Can I tell you a story? I just want to share something with you. One day I was in Kentucky and I was talking to myself and myself was talking to me. I don't know about you. I talk to myself and myself talks back to me. The only thing is that I don't answer anything to myself. I just kind of talk to myself and let myself talk back to me. So I was sitting in my den working on some sermons, right? And the Spirit said, write a letter to Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright. Write a letter to Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright. You be Timothy as if you were writing to Paul. And what was so incidental about that was that in the midst of that conversation between me and myself, I had already been studying the reconstruction of the first letter that was sent to Paul. Because when you consider the two epistles that Paul writes with Timothy's address on them, Paul is responding to Timothy, right? Because Timothy wrote Paul first, and so Paul is responding to Timothy. That's the reason why we have to reconstruct what the conversation was that Timothy wrote to Paul. So I did the same thing that Timothy did, right? Dr. Jeremiah Wright, been a fan of him, been loved by him and admonished by him for many years, and just love him and just enjoy his preaching and love his ministry at Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago, Illinois, love his journey. So I writes him a letter. And I'm scared because I don't know if he ever going to write me back. I wrote him a letter because I told him about all these preachers I admire: H. Beecher Hicks, Sandy F. Ray, Gardner Taylor, himself as well, John W. Kennedy, Lance Watson, Freddie Haynes, E. Dewey Smith. I love all these great preachers. He writes back. And says, Brother Smith, thank you for the letter, etc., etc., etc. He got through all those pleasantries, and then he said, I know it's nice to admire some heroes. He said, but I want to help you to understand something. The difference between you and them is that they have theological education and you don't. He says this to me. He says, get your behind to Atlanta and get in ITC and tell Dr. Michael Battle that I sent you. I didn't even know what was going on. I got introduced to a preacher named Darren Williams, who happened to be a student at the Interdenominational Theological Seminary in Atlanta Center in Atlanta. He introduced me to Dr. Perkins, who was the president and dean of Morehouse School of Religion back then. He introduced me to the dean, and the dean interviewed me at that time and said, I'm going to bring you before the board to let you get in this school. I said, you mean to tell me I can apply and get in? He says, there is a very slim chance, but I believe that you can get in. Now, you missing the shout, because I already graduated with the Masters of Divinity and a Doctorate of Ministry. What you forgot to shout about is that I wrote a letter in faith. God responded to what the prophet had shared to me. Why? Because when God helps you to get where you want to go, God will bless you with the word of faith that has been put in your heart. Let me help somebody. I didn't ever know how I was going to get to the school. And how I got to the school was Ford said, we're shutting down a shift and we need to ship 2 people somewhere else. There was an opening in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's eligible for 2 people to go. And the 2 people that went was me and another brother, and he wound up going back. So I said, God, you mean to tell me that you want me to go to Atlanta, participate at the ITC, and you shut down a shift to shift your son to Atlanta? You're missing your shout, crew. I'm trying to help somebody to understand. When God is on board your life, regardless of what the storm looks like, when God has his hands on your life, God will get you to the destination that God has already designed for you. I'm trying to help somebody to understand. Don't you worry about getting over to the other side, and don't you get caught up with what is in front of you, because we walk by faith, or we sail by faith and not by sight. When God gets ready to put you where he wants you to be, God will navigate the circumstances of your life and everybody else's life around you to get you where God wants you to be. Say, check your cargo and examine who's on board. He says, if we're going to check our cargo, secondly, we got to learn how to evaluate and calculate what's in the bow. If Jesus is on our boat, and if Jesus is who he say he is to us, we got to learn how to calculate the worth of what's on our ship. He is the one who qualifies and supplies our every need. He is the one who solidifies and he helps our hopes and our dreams. Jesus helps us because he magnifies and amplifies our faith with passion. He is the one who mobilizes and energizes our hope and our happiness. That's the reason why you have not been stopped regardless of what you've been up against. Jesus has a way of helping you get to where you are supposed to be by allowing life circumstances to empower you to keep on going. I've never rowed a boat, but I've watched those guys who get in those boats and row. And then what is amazing about when they're rowing, the more they row, the stronger they get. I'm trying to help somebody. I know you don't feel it this morning like I do. But I'm amazed that while they're rowing, their bodies are being built to handle the terrain of the waves regardless of the opposition of the wind. When they are rowing, their muscles are being stretched to get them to the destination, but their muscles are also being improved or empowered, because when you stretch a muscle, you can also grow a muscle at the same time. Muscles have to have water in order to grow. Muscles have to have water in order to be strong. Muscles have to have water in order to rebuild themselves. Let me help somebody. You got to have water in your life to help you rebuild everything that the world has torn down. You got to have water in your life to build muscles that when hell show up, you don't run, you stand and do exactly what God would have you to do. You got to have water in your life because it will rebuild you where your faith has been depleted by life's oppositions and life's problems. In other words, my brothers and sisters, God helps us get to where we want to be by allowing us to go through something in order to bring us to something. I wish I had some witnesses. You do remember the text says that Jesus says we're going over to the other side. When Jesus gives you a directive, he helps you to understand that no weapon formed against you in the water, in the air, or on land is going to stop you from getting where God would have you to be. I wish I had somebody here who would help me this morning. I wish I had a witness somewhere online. I know it looked bad last year on second Sunday of March of 2020. And I know we lost some people. I don't call it a loss. Some people got an elevation.